grader from Prairie Branch. Lucy Stout, a 5th grader from Stony Point. Adley Ackerson from Prairie Branch, a 4th grader. And Ellie Blanchette, a 5th grader from Prairie Branch. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you so much. Next up, we have students from Matthews Elementary who are part of the student council who would like to come up and present about School Board Appreciation Month, which is coming up in March.
Come on up. Oh, don't be. Good evening. We have our Stuco here and our 2 Stuco leaders, Brianna Nicholson, who is a 4th grade teacher, and Lauren Sonker, who is a 5th grade teacher. And they are our Stuco sponsors who work very closely with our Stuco group to do all good things for our building and beyond. And we just want to say thank you guys so much for what you do for not only Matthews, but for our district as a whole. We greatly appreciate it and just want to take a minute to pass out some gifts and let you know how much we appreciate you guys.
Thank you very much.
If you have your group stick around, we'll do a group, we'll get the school board maybe come out front and take a picture with the students.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Okay.
Just the students.
Thank you guys.
You want to do it now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, we'll do it now.
They want it now?
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for coming, and we appreciate it. At this time, we will get ready to do patron comments. Anybody that doesn't want to stay for the remaining meeting, you can go ahead and leave now, or you can stick around for the rest of it. It's up to you. All right, that will take us to patron comments. Any school district patron may present information to the board at this time. Presentations will be limited to no more than 5 minutes. The board will not take action on any issue not included on the published agenda. However, all comments will be taken into consideration by the Board of Education. Patrons are requested not to discuss individual faculty, staff, or students. Patrons are reminded that this is a public forum and comments relative to individuals could result in litigation. However, any patron may request to meet with the board in executive session. No response will be given by the board at this time. There was no one that signed up. Is there anybody that wanted to speak? All right. That will move us to reports. We'll start with the superintendent's report.
All right, you have our financial summary, our year-to-date revenues and expenditures. This is as of January. So we had a little switch. This is December and January is the time of year where a lot of our more local revenue, our levy-based revenue comes in. It all gets front-loaded. And so this is the time of year where you'll see that under the revenues, it represents 65.27% of revenues for the year, while our expenditures to date are only at 51.87. Those will level out as we get closer to June, and as our monthly state payments come in, you'll see that level out. But we're tracking as expected on both of those. And then on our, as we reported last time, on our health premium overages, we had just initiated another $300,000 payment the last time. So now we have allocated all $800,000 of our budgeted health premium overages for the year. So if we get between now and June, if we need another one, we'll report back to the board, and we'll also, talk at that time about how we handle the implications for that. But we have certainly used our allocation on that. And then you also see our student attendance and how that is tracking compared to last year. Any questions on those?
Do we know this time last year where we were at on the health insurance? Could you effort that?
I would say probably right around the same that we are this year. I could take a few minutes here and go back and look, but if I had to just go off the top of my head, I would say we're probably pretty similar.
I tried looking back at the previous, and I couldn't find it. So.
Yeah. Would you, Mr. Huber, would you agree? He's faster with the computer than I am, but I mean, I can go back in and look at all of our monthly, I actually could go back and look at this time, last February's monthly report, and it would say how much we had made to date, but like I said, it'd take a second. But
If you guys find it, just interject.
you bet, 100%.
Any other questions on the top part? I want to bring forward a couple other highlights. Want to talk about snow days. And there's, of course, been changes even since you got this update from me, but we have now used all 36 hours of our allotted AMI for weather. So six days, our first 6 weather event days were AMI days, and we have since had 5 more snow day cancellations. We do have a plan to make up those 5 days. President's Day, we were in school, we made up the first of those. We will use April 18th, and that's a Friday, and Monday, April 21st. For the next days. And then we have later on the agenda tonight as discussion and an action item, if it pleases the board. We have a PD day, a professional development day, on the second Tuesday in April, which is election day. That usually works out really good for us to have a PD day because we do have a couple of schools that are used as polling places. But we could, and we are recommending tonight, that we have the board designate that as a snow makeup day. So students would actually be in session that day. We would lose a valuable PD day, but we think under the circumstances, we think it's better to minimize the amount of time we're in school after Memorial Day. We just don't expect very good attendance after Memorial Day. So that would be our 4th snow makeup day, and then the 5th would still be the Tuesday after Memorial Day. So we're still going to have to come back after Memorial Day unless one of the bills at the state legislature makes it across the governor's desk before Memorial Day that would would reinterpret or reclaim that since we had a calendar approved where we intended to have 169 student days, that would be good enough regardless of weather. But right now the law of the land is we need to make them up. Any questions on snow days? And we'll talk about that again when we look at the calendar later in the agenda. Also want to give you an update on state funding, and next month, part of our budget update for planning next year's budget in March, at your March meeting, will be to kind of forecast different possibilities for funding. But Governor Mike Kehoe released his budget recommendations, which will act as a starting point for the legislature to build the state budget for next year. The governor recommends a flat state adequacy target. Now, he has other categoricals where he's recommending additional money for education. But in terms of the second half of the adjustment that we're expecting on our state adequacy target, he's going to his recommendation is to short that by $300 million. So that will have implications for us. And so in March, we will bring you some various scenarios. So if it stays flat at $6,760, this is the SAT multiplier. We'll have some projections for what that does for our budget for next year. If it's fully funded to the $7,145, then we'll show what that could look like. And then we'll do at least one scenario in between in case the state is able to partially fund the growth on the SAT. So just wanted to keep you updated on that. And then you see some calendar highlights March through May there at the bottom. Any other questions on that or other aspects of the superintendent's report from the departments and schools?
Do we have an anticipated financial shortcoming from that? $1.5 million, $1.7 million on the budget you were just talking about for the flat state adequacy target?
Oh, yes, there would be.
Projected shortfall.
Well, what it's going to impact is our ability to give raises or to add positions for next year. So that's what we'll look at in March, is to see if it is flat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just don't know that dollar amount yet, correct?
No, that's correct. That's correct. And I don't know that we'll know by March, so I think that's why behind the scenes we're just planning for a variety of scenarios. That way the board can have that in front of them of what those implications might be.
Dr. Welly, I did find the amount.
Yes.
We were exactly at $800,000 at this point last year as well. However, we did follow March with a pretty big substantial payment. So we're going to hope that trend doesn't continue, but we are exactly at $800,000 at this point last year as well. A payment in September and another payment in November.
Thank you. Any other questions on superintendent's report?
All right. None there.
Okay. State legislative highlight. This is a new feature. Last summer, I believe, when we started talking about, we were celebrating the passage of our levy, but we were also, when we talk about the financial state of the district in future years, one of the challenges or threats to some of the things that we want to try to do would be various legislations. And so the board challenged us to provide updates on what those challenges or threats might be. So we thought we would lead it off with a talk about some of the bills that have to do with open enrollment in Missouri. Both the House and the Senate have bills that are actively moving through the system that would provide open enrollment. So you have summaries on two bills. There's more than two bills, but we're highlighting the two bills that seem to have legs right now. Senate Bill 215, that passed the Senate Education Committee last week. It was reported to the floor and is 7th on the Senate's formal calendar. We thought maybe it would be debated this week. It doesn't look like it's going to. I don't think it was debated this week now. It looks like it's scheduled maybe for next week to be debated. This bill utilizes the existing transfer law for a student to transfer away from an unaccredited school district. And basically what it does is it takes that same framework and it basically just applies it to every school district in the state. So it would significantly increase the cost of transportation. The idea is that the state money would go with the student, and the proponents of the bill just say, in most cases it would be a wash. You'd have some students come in, you'd have some students go out. But the transportation to and from every district would have another district that they would have to provide transportation to and from. And so that cost, if it was one of our neighboring districts, all those additional costs in bus routes, or maybe it's one bus route, but any of those additional costs would now be by the sending district. So you wouldn't have an option to participate, and you wouldn't have an option to provide transportation to one designated school district nearby. That's the really brief gist on that one. The House bill that we're highlighting is House Bill 711. It has passed the Elementary and Secondary Education Committee, and it is on the Committee on Legislative Review. Representative Pollitt, who introduced the bill, has made additional changes to the originally filed bill. It no longer contains a provision, and this is a provision that had carried over from last year, that basically said school districts could deny a student because if they couldn't meet their special education needs. That statement's now been struck. So which nobody felt like that would hold up in court anyway, that you could tell a student they couldn't transfer because you couldn't meet their IEP, so that wasn't a realistic one in the first place. The bill also contains mileage requirements for the distance that schools participating in open enrollment would need to provide transportation for any student who is transferring who qualifies for free or reduced lunch, or special education students. So there will already be baked in additional costs for transportation. Non-resident districts would be required to travel either 5 miles into a contiguous school district or 30 miles from the attendance center of a student is attending, whichever distance is greater. So there would be some calculations that would happen there. This bill contains a limit of 3% of your students that would be allowed to leave your district annually. And of course, that percentage could be modified in subsequent years, but 3% could leave the first year, 3% could leave the next year. So 3% of your state money also leaves with them. As we learned in our demography study, we already have an exceptionally high level of market share. Some of the numbers, there was some confusion in some of the numbers in the demography study, but roughly we're in the mid-90s. So because the House bill allows for certain homeschool and private school students to take advantage of this transfer money, even if they're not currently your students, even though we have, say, 95% of the market share of students attending our schools in our area, conceivably in the first year, it's possible that not a single current student would be able to leave if 3% represent the homeschool and private school families who already don't attend. So think about it, year one, we could potentially not lose any students, but we would still lose the state funding for those 3% of those students. And then the next year it's another 3%, and then the next year it's another 3%. So even though I think there's going to be broad appeal, like what's the loss? You're going to gain some kids, you're going to lose some kids. Well, the way it's structured, it's going to be a more expensive system to operate, and there won't be additional money provided to meet these costs.
That's one of my questions, like from the first one and the second one. Has transportation been fully funded?
Fully with quotes, which means we get 75% reimbursement.
Right, so already we're not getting equal reimbursement for transportation.
Right.
So then we would be taking on additional transportation costs and needing, I would assume, additional drivers and resources?
Eventually it would come to that. The first 3%, if they all went to the same school district, they're all from the same neighborhood and they all go to the same school district, that's easier for us. But that's not usually how that works. Mm-hmm. It's K-12 3%. So it could be all grade levels from all parts of our town
which
going
different
there.
starts and stops and
Yes.
everything else like that. And then when you factor in 30 miles, Kansas City is 30 miles from us. So, and that's a two-way street, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, every school district's hiring for bus drivers. We still have our sign out, don't we?
Yes.
So I just think that's a heavy cost.
There is another Senate Bill 70. It is similar to House Bill 711. It has a 5% cap on the number of students who would exit a year rather than a 3% cap. But it doesn't, it's kind of widely held that these are the two bills that are more likely to move forward in the process.
And then the other thing that I have concerns about is the attendance percentage. So it says if the student is attending 80% of the time, which we know according to MSIP standards, we need 90% of the time,
Right.
then the student should be given an opportunity the following quarter to reach 90%. Well, that's not going to help us out any because we're still gauged on the whole entire school year's attendance percentage. That
Correct.
one down, one up still averages out to not enough.
In fact, on one of these
So
bills.
then we're continuously being penalized and held accountable when we don't have control of the situation or the factors. And then transportation, in addition, we know that it's a lot easier to get to school every day when our consistent bus route is showing up. Attendance then drastically falls off. That's when attendance falls off, is when transportation isn't consistent. So, yeah.
In one of the bills, I forgot my thought on that. It'll come back to me. It's
Yeah,
all good.
I kept going there, I'm sorry.
So I just want to verify that this is the 215 is only for unaccredited districts. And how many districts within a 30-mile radius is that consistent with?
So to clarify on the unaccredited districts, what Senator Trent has done in this bill is he's taking the transfer language that's already baked in on where you can transfer from an unaccredited district. And what he's saying is he's going back in and amending that law to say, it's not just unaccredited districts. Now he's proposing that should be transfer away from any school district, credited or unaccredited. So that's what's different about the two bills, is he's actually built his off of an existing law that was intended to be used for other reasons.
That's what I was asking, because
Yes.
in our notes it says that. And then I think that we also have to keep in mind that it's not necessarily a bus that we'll be using. It'll be Ubers and cabs. And then there becomes, a
Any
lot of
means
other
possible.
issues, any means possible. And so we talk about the bus issue. I think about my students who come in Ubers and cabs every day and the risks that they take, and that is concerning to me as well. So that just 2 cents there.
There's another safeguard that on the surface it makes a lot of sense that's built into the bill language, and that is that you, as a district, we would report how many open seats we have, so to speak, to get us to a capacity in a classroom and in a building. So let's say that we've got Matthews Elementary School we deem that there's not a single classroom at Matthews Elementary School, for example, that has capacity, but maybe Snyabar has 8 classrooms that have room for 3 more kids. So we're going to say that Snyabar has room for 24 more kids. So we receive transfers. We don't have to accept so many transfers in a particular grade level or school that we have to build another school, add classrooms, or add teachers. However, year one, we say we've got 24 slots at Snyabar, and we fill those slots with transfers. Now we have a couple of families who move to town, and they move within the Snyabar attendance area, and they now put us over capacity in 2 or 3 of those classrooms. So we hire 2 or 3 more teachers. We find 2 or 3 more classrooms. Now we have to report to the state that because we hired those teachers, now we have a capacity of another 70 students because we hired more teachers. So it looks like a safeguard, but it is, for a growing district like ours, it has a multiplier effect. And yes, the state money comes with the student. Not all students cost the same to educate. We don't usually have to talk about that, but when things start getting more expensive, we'll have to talk about the fact that not all students cost $12,000 per year to educate. Some students cost $60,000 a year to educate. And when we're already approaching capacity at our elementary levels, and at this point, we know that at some point we're going to need elementary school number 5. I don't think it's in the short term, but that's something that we've been working on, right? Someday we'll build elementary number 5. I'm confident of it. The families who will help us pay for that school are only resident families. No transfer family dollars are going towards any of the debt service on any of the money that we borrow. So.
Well, because all of our residents help fund our schools and then therefore get a say. Our residents are the ones that are voting on the levies and voting on the bonds and those types of things. And it's all residents' money that's being accounted for. So whether you have a school-age kid or not, our community supports our schools and the things we stand for.
Yeah. So wanted to
Get a
put
say in that.
those summaries in front of you and the full language, and our plan will be to bring back, if there's a significant update on this, we'll bring it back next month. Otherwise, we'll move on to another education-related topic.
Just one quick question, you might have answered it already. Would we be responsible for the cost of receiving the students and sending students, or just?
It
Both.
depends on the bill. One of the bills, we are responsible for transporting the students that transfer out. And the other bill, we're going to be responsible for some of the students who transfer in. So it just depends on what makes it across the
So
finish
even
line.
though the revenue follows the pupil to the district, that's why the transportation cost goes up, because you're not, well, besides
Yeah.
just the cost, but
You're going
you're
to participate, I mean, everyone.
You're losing the
ultimately-
revenue from a student going to another district potentially,
Yes,
and still absorbing some of the soft costs to get them there,
yeah, and let's say
and
that it
all
was,
of the cost receiving.
and let's say it was a net zero, like, let's say that we transferred out exactly the same number of students every year that we transferred in, so it looks like a wash, but the whole transporting kids outside the district is an additional expense that will be possibly paid off the top. Like, they might guarantee that we're gonna get paid for those transportation costs, but that's gonna come off the top of the foundation formula. It's gonna come off the top of transportation funding. So those bills will all get paid first across the state, and then all districts will get paid from the state the remaining dollars through the foundation formula and through transportation
Do
funding.
we have a representative that could go to Jeff City and express some of these concerns?
I'll be there next week.
Thank you.
And I'm meeting with our local reps and senators, and just, basically giving the same talking points that I'm sharing with you. Like, I get the general appeal of open enrollment, but I don't feel like the way that we fund, we're very local control based in Missouri, and the way we fund schools in Missouri, it doesn't make it conducive. And we haven't even talked about athletics tonight. That's a whole other thing. Now, some people will get excited about the fact that we can recruit the best athletes in the metro to come as middle schoolers to Grain Valley. But if you already live here and the transfer kids are competing with your kid for opportunities, like, there's gonna be a lot of hurt feelings. I think I'm really proud of the fact that all of our kids are all of our kids. And I don't want there to be these are our kids, well, that's not really our kid. Because if a kid is here, it's our kid. And I just hate for anything that would challenge that.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
So is that something that we would want to move forward with as a board, as to, like, our position on it at all? Especially if you're going to be advocating next week at Jeff City, is that, or Jeff?
So,
That would be totally up to the board.
yeah, I mean, I think because the way that these bills go through and they're always moving targets, I mean, this
Yeah.
is nowhere near what's gonna, I'm sure, come to the end.
Right.
I mean, I think if we as a board wanted to put a group of thoughts that we're not okay with X, Y, Z, I don't think that there'd be any issue with that. And I don't know that we need to hash all that out here. I mean, we can,
Correct.
yeah, if we wanted to put a few bullet points together as a board, and I think we could collaborate and send that.
Potentially for March.
Or, I mean, if you're going next week, I think we'd start drafting something, we could all collaborate on it and get you something.
Okay. Very good.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. All right. That takes us to learning, assessing, and grading. This will be very interesting.
Yes, work has been underway to strengthen our approach to grading and ensure that it is aligned with learning and assessment. And the board had asked us for an update on how that's going, and so Dr. Allen has prepared an update report, so we'll turn it over to her.
Yeah. I tried to provide a lot of information in the report, so of course I'm open to any questions, but essentially we have taken, our team has taken the semester to sort of get through the curriculum audit. lay out sort of a plan of attack for the next several years to try to get curriculum written in all of our courses. We've gotten some good headway and got some good momentum going. Been a little staggering just recently with the snow days. We're doing a lot of rescheduling, but we'll get there. So we feel like we're in a solid enough spot now to start addressing some other aspects that come with learning, assessing, and grading. And so just basically these are two processes that'll go alongside one another as curriculum's developed. It is the perfect time to look at the reliability of our grading system and fine tune a lot of things that maybe weren't there as a solid foundation prior to implementation because we didn't have curriculum written in all of our courses yet. And so those courses that have already been written and the courses that are getting written and the courses that are to be written, we're going to really work with our building administration along with our building leadership teams to start identifying reporting standards that are true standards from Missouri Learning Standards or national standards that are intended to be the sole focus of the academic achievement of students, along with a second look at, we've been calling them kind of behaviors that promote learning, or those soft skills and the behaviors that are reported separately from our academic progress as well. And so it's just providing a perfect opportunity with this intense curriculum process to sort of reevaluate the two side by side as we go. So I tried to provide you sort of a timeline of events, what we've done so far, where we're headed, and that's just through the remainder of this year. And then my intention, because we will be so far down the road with our curriculum development process, would be at the start of next year, just like we had priorities built, annual priorities built around curriculum development, would be to do the same with some of the other aspects with assessment and grading then for next school year, to sort of continue the momentum. So, but I'm happy to answer any questions about any portions of this or in addition to this.
All right, any questions on learning, assessing, and grading?
I don't know that it's a question as much as a statement. Are we, I feel like we're tiptoeing around standards-based grading here. So I guess I don't know what my question is. I'm trying to understand the difference between the way we grade and what I hear termed as standards-based grading. And I don't truly understand it. So can you help me understand the differences in how, and I guess at the high school level, because I think it's a little different at every level. So help me understand that. What's the difference between what I hear as standards-based grading, which is pretty rigid, based on what I hear. I don't know what it really is, what I hear, versus the way we currently grade.
I mean, our intention is to be fully standards-based grading, but I think where we fall short sometimes is if we have no course curriculum written, then we could potentially have a teacher in isolation that teaches their own course. They're the only person who teaches it, and they have on their own, without any guidance or training, had to pull specific standards that they've just chosen to be their reporting standards, so what's in the grade book, essentially, that allows the students to track how close they are, allows a parent to log in and see how close they are to reaching mastery on those particular topics. And where I feel like we could shore up that reliability is through our curriculum writing process, so that we're making sure that when you look at, hundreds or dozens of state or national standards, and you're trying to pull out the most important, your highest priority, or how I'm going to cluster those to identify what's most important for the student, not only in success in this class, but to build them success in the next class, that we just need to make sure that those are the right standards that we've identified, so that we're having the right conversations for feedback with students, which is what all research and evidence-based instructional strategies say, is you've got to have specific, timely, accurate feedback. And without working towards the right standard, then it just muddies it. Like you're not quite sure, if my standard I'm reporting out on in a class, let's just say, is titled literacy, that could mean all sorts of things, right? So we need very specific, targeted standards that students know where they're working, and teachers can give feedback to that. It also should greatly help our instructional practices if we do it well, because if you look at your class as a whole on a specific target or standard, and most of your class isn't doing well towards it, it's going to tell you what you need to do to alter your teaching to get them to that standard. And like I said, I think that starts with really accurate reporting standards or those identified standards, and that's where I think we need some professional development and some support around to make sure we're doing that correctly. Yeah.
So on the standards-based grading, a couple questions. How much time and how difficult do our teachers have to spend quite a bit of time coaching parents and maybe even students, I don't know, on this? Because I think we've been doing this for, I don't know how long, 15 years. And what I always hear is exactly what Jared just said. I don't understand it. And I feel like most people are in that boat. And our teachers end up spending an awful lot of time trying to explain what this is, at least in the grading, right? And how what you got, whether you met the standard or whatever, once you met that standard, you get a 2, a 3, a 4, whatever. Well, what does that mean, right? And so they're trying to figure out and understand that do we spend a significant amount of time, consistently, constantly trying to communicate? Does our grading scale need to change? In other words.
Well, we've spent quite a bit of time actually recently looking at the research surrounding this, and there's been a lot of interesting things that we found. One is that all of the academic system for grading was meant to be around 5 categories, so A, B, C, D, or F. That was as much as any teacher could handle differentiating between categories. All schools pretty much started with a 100-point scale. And what they found is you take any expert in any one area, English, science, whatever it is, even with a trained professional, like a trained educator in that content area, they could never score within 8% of one another. The inter-rater reliability was 8 points or more. So one teacher scores an 81%, the next teacher scored an 89. There was just really no way to unify that. So from that, and I think elementary schools were a really good model for this, kind of developed this standards-based idea where it came very naturally at the elementary because it was very understandable to parents. I can count from 1 to 10. That's my standard. How close or how far is my student from that? Well, they get the numbers out of order. And when we do it in elementary school, it seems, even preschool, it seems to make sense to parents. They understand it. It's very specific. It's not just saying my student has a B in reading. Okay, well, can they read well or not? What do they need to work on? What does the teacher need to do to adjust instruction? So I feel like elementary becomes very simple to parents, and that makes sense. And we don't, at least the feedback that I've gotten from grade cards is these standards make sense. I understand how close my student is to meeting them. If they're not meeting them, I can have a conversation and my teacher can tell me, if they're nearing proficiency, here's what your student needs to work on and what they need to do to get there. So then it gets a little trickier in middle and high school because you have so many different content areas. And then we shift from that printed grade card to PowerSchool. And so that conversation of how do we train parents to know how to look into PowerSchool, to click on the letter grade and see those standards and understand how close or how far away a student is from that standard, is where I would say some of our teachers are way stronger at explaining that than others. And part of that is those teachers who have their curriculum written, because when their curriculum's written and you reach out as a parent and you say, I'm really concerned about this grade, tell me what this 2 means, they could send you their proficiency scale. Well, here's what a 2 means, here's what a 3 means, here's what a 4, and the parent has that. And I have had teachers at the high school do that for me as a parent, say, here's the proficiency scale, here's where your student's scoring, and these are the things they would need to work on to get there. And it's very clear then what exactly my student knows and can do and what they can't. So I feel like some of our teachers are at a disadvantage where that's not outlined that clearly because they haven't been given the time or the training to develop curriculum in their course yet. So that's why we feel like it's so important, and we're developing a plan to give them that time and that training to make sure they have those resources so there's clarity around the assigned grade, basically. That makes sense.
And then, and I think the debate on whether or not understanding of the grading scale varies with people, but I think the other question for me is then on the standard based on some of the things that we do that standard based allows, and I'm not even sure, I'm still trying to figure out what actual standard based is and what we do, and I guess it depends on curriculum, but a lot of students that have left our school, gone to college, struggle with, and the question that I've asked is, do you feel prepared? And it's 50-50 because it's different for them when they get to college. And so where would you say that we are with that? Are we preparing them well with standard based? Do our kids that leave feel like that, hey, this is setting me up well?
I would like to say yes. I feel like the feedback that you could get from any school district of any type of student at any college, depending on where they go. What I will say is what the research tells us, like what's the greatest correlation between success in high school and success in college is a GPA. And they said the reason for that is there's zero reliability with a single score. But in high school, you get multiple grades for multiple courses averaged over a period of time to get your GPA, and that's what makes it so accurate, and that's the greatest connection between your GPA in high school is the greatest connection to how you're going to perform in college. So for us, our job, we feel like, and Dr. Smith, feel free to jump in here, but we feel like the best job that we can do is to clearly outline for students in each class what it is that they need to master, how close they are to mastering it, and then as instructors, figure out ways to get them there. I think that's what will best prepare the students for whatever future may hold for them.
I guess I know that some of the stuff that we do, like allowing for homework to be turned in whenever, retaking tests and those kind of things are not necessarily things that they're going to be able to do in college. What's the I guess the reasoning or the encouragement for that, and kids taking responsibility on, well, I didn't get this done timely, but I can still get the score, whenever I turn it in, those kind of things.
Well, I feel like there's two parts to your question. To me, first is like, what's our purpose for grading? Why do we grade? Well, we're having our teams answer that question right now, but essentially the couple of schools that we've heard from, they're working through this with some research as they're building leadership teams right now. But basically it's to provide feedback on where a student is, and that insinuates then that we'd like to get them where they're supposed to be. So, when we say, if you want to take homework specifically, who knows who's doing the homework? So like homework is really unreliable, but it's practice, it's at home, that's great if they're doing it. As far as the no timeline, there's still an end result of when they have to take a test. There's still a final score that goes in the grade book at semester. None of that can be changed. But we do try to provide opportunities where we can continue to reteach, and there are guidelines among reteaching. You don't just get to keep, I don't know how many kids have taken their driving test, but when you go in, you just get to guess. And then if you miss them all, they tell you the correct answers and you guess again. And that's not what it looks like in our system. Our system requires students to do additional learning and to be retaught prior to retaking anything. So the real intention is to teach them more. So what we want our grades to mean is how much a student learns, I mean, that's truly what we want the grade to reflect. So we do give multiple opportunities for students who take them and go through the process that they're required to take, to go through in order to retake.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I understand it, at the high school level, we'll just use that one, it doesn't matter when the student demonstrates that they've met, exceeded, whatever that level of the standard is. It could be the very last day of the semester, and if they meet or exceed the standard, then, and that's all they did all semester, then they've passed? Is that how that works?
So want to make sure I'm characterizing this right. So if you're saying a student sits back and does nothing all semester but aces every test and then aces the final.
Yep.
Okay. To me, that's not a challenging enough class. I mean, you may come along that once in a million student who is, it happens, I mean, but it's rare. And I've got 3 high schoolers, 2 currently, 1 that's graduated, and I can tell you if you sit back and do nothing, you don't do well. Or the class isn't challenging enough, and again, that's an evaluation and looking at our curriculum. There is nobody who should be able to sit without practicing or learning or interacting and ace everything, or that class isn't to the rigor that it should be.
So the students that, and I heard what your answer was to Mr. Williams, but the students that are leaving our district and going to the college setting that are saying we were unprepared, we did decent, we did good at, at high school, we thought we were doing well. We got here and we were unprepared. We just weren't ready for what they require us to do here. And the response to that is?
I think there's a lot of factors that can play into that. There's many kids who will go through high school and never take an advanced course or have tried to do any sort of advanced coursework and haven't had that experience, so they don't understand maybe some of the rigor requirements. Well, and I think our high school does a remarkable job of giving opportunities for college credit. So students get to take college prep, AP courses, but also college credit courses. I know my students both at their senior year enrolled in MCC and did courses alongside to get some gen ed, and are doing fabulously in there. I do see that preparation and not giving up and learning and how to study and how to relearn when you don't get something you don't understand, and not to give up is really valuable, I think, for that next step. but I will say to both of your points, one of the things that we have a desire to do is to find, as parents, as community members, as students, and as teachers, what are the needs? And so one of our steps is next month we'll be sending out a survey. We're going to keep it between 5 to 7 questions, but with an open-ended question. Because if we advertise it takes fewer than 5 minutes, I find we get much better participation. But just trying to get feedback on where is the misunderstanding, what is it that we feel like we are doing or aren't doing, things you like, things you don't like, things that would help, PD we could provide, parent support we could provide, training, brochures, what is it? To try to gather feedback from not only parents and community members, which is that communication piece, but also our teachers, who would be that support PD piece, and then from students. What's their perspective and how do they think they're being supported? So that'll go out next month as well.
Can I add from my personal experience? So I think Green Valley is, and this is, again, my perspective, right? So I think Green Valley is very upfront with the fact that we are standards-based grading and we use this scale and we use these targets and we're clearly aligned. Multiple other school districts in our area have a lot of some of the very similar practices. They, so like you can turn in late work or demonstrate knowledge until a unit test. Like that's become pretty common practice in school policy of you can continue, using your driver's test, like the physical tests, like you don't average out those scores. When you pass your test because you truly have the knowledge. So there are things like that that happen in many school districts with being able to exhibit that knowledge and get the grade for that. I think Green Valley is more purposeful in how we say those things are happening versus some districts. And it's not that they're being like not transparent. It's just they've adapted some of those processes into their normal that have then continued to mock some of those types of things. So like with deadlines per se, or like there's not as much focus on homework. It's more the summative type of pieces versus those small formatives. So that's a shift I think that education is going. That's, I don't know, Julie, are there other practices that are like continuing to be adopted in that, or I don't know if I'm off. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I mean, I would always say that education is evolving.
Ever evolving, yes.
And so,
Yeah. And we beg, borrow, and steal from everybody.
And so I can see, yes, but I do feel that also being in the college setting and teaching, I don't see a lot of standards-based grading. We've had one core class go to that for freshmen, but I'm not seeing as much as that. It is still, did you meet?
Traditional.
Yeah, it's a traditional grade. Did you meet the expectation of turning it on time? It is always a penalty if it is late. There are very strict guidelines. But when it comes to high school, like there are varying, but I like I said, it's a ever evolving system.
One aspect I like is I think it encourages individual responsibility. I've seen in my daughter, still getting used to the emails throughout the day asking me how my day's going, but it's yeah, which is, hey Dad, how's your day? Good. That's the universal sign for good, by the way. But it's at first it took me a little bit to get used to. But when it opened up conversations at home, when I'm getting a notification that my daughter hasn't turned in homework, or I'm checking in, those as a parent, to me, those are the meaningful conversations where it's not just about, as Dr. Smith said, not just about playing the education system, but in those moments I get to sit down and talk about life responsibility, right? Learning is ever changing. Education is evolving. But I've appreciated that individual responsibility that it does put on the student, and if they're not used to that, there's an equal opportunity to learn that and to excel in life with whatever you do, whether it's education or in the workplace, if you want it, you can get it. If you want to learn, there is plenty of information out there to learn. So I'll leave it at that.
And I would like to say, as long as students understand standards-based grading, like I remember when I started at the high school, one of the biggest things, and my daughter specifically, is that the principals were like, your student is their own advocate. They need to learn how to speak the speak, talk the talk, have those conversations. And so that is the one piece that if a student understands and gets the standards-based grading piece that I love about it, because now a student is in charge of their learning, because when they do go to college, mom and dad aren't there in the background being able to have those conversations. That is all private information at that point. And so I will say that being able to advocate for yourself based off of SVG is something that I did appreciate when I was in the high school.
So the other thing that with the report, with a lot of the curriculum that is still being put together, and so we don't have the same standards across the board for everyone. So how are staff members going about standards-based grading when they're not working on the same plane?
If they have a department, if they have a grade level or a same content area, then they do collaborate and they work together as a group to try to, as their own content experts, to identify those. But I will say there's building level oversight. There's not been district level oversight of any kind until they come to the curriculum writing phase. And I don't know a better way to say that we're behind, but we're excited for the progress we're making, and we've got a plan, and we're really optimistic about it. What we plan to do in the meantime, because we don't want to wait 3 years, which is what it's probably going to take us to have every course, and we're talking about Eagle Times and everything, planned out and written, is we are going to lean a little bit on our building principals to push out to our building leadership teams, to push out to the teams to work on reporting standards, to get as much unity as we can, to get as much oversight as we can, to feel really confident in the product that we have until it's their turn to come up and do some curriculum writing. I also feel like the more people that we have come in with curriculum teams, the more train the trainers that we're getting, the more that'll spread out into the buildings. If you've never, you're new to teaching, or you've been teaching a while, but you've never been part of a curriculum development process, you might not know what that's about, or really have time to unpack the standards and look at our data from previous years and really figure out where we need to emphasize and place our time. And we love being able to give teachers time to do that. And so, like I said, I will feel most confident about those courses that are written. The ones that aren't, we're going to use some of our other building leadership teams to help support in the meantime. But eventually, I would say in the next 2.5 years, we'll be through all of those courses, and we'll have all of that oversight and support from district down by that point.
So for a new teacher just out of college, or a new teacher to the district that hasn't worked with standards-based grading before, how much intentional time is spent with them, development is with them to make sure that they understand how to do standards-based grading?
So our onboarding is something that we do very intentionally, but something that we kind of reevaluated last year is we spent more time with new teachers than we did with new to district. And some of the feedback that we got was, hey, I've been teaching a long time, but I'm new to the district and new to standards-based. I could have used more time. So one of the strategies that we're planning to do for our onboarding, or that new teacher week where we bring them in for a week and do training, is where we do more days for new teachers. We're going to provide the schedule of what it looks like and allow new to district to be part of it. If they're coming from a district that is standards-based, they may not need it, just to differentiate it a little bit. If they're coming new to us from another district and have never done it before and they feel like they need more support and more time, then we will allow them to join us for more days. So when we do reflect back on our onboarding process and get feedback, that was something that was reported that we're going to do differently this year, just to allow for longer time, more support at the building level, more collaborative time around that, because that onboarding piece is huge. You're right.
Dr. Taylor, do you feel and I'm going to pick on you a little bit. Do you feel that from district to district, from teachers coming back and forth, or from one place to another, the standards-based grading concept is the same, or can different districts have different concepts?
Districts can have different concepts because, once again, we are all focusing on the standards that are issued by the state. It just looks differently in the way that it's graded. And so when I think about, curriculum in any other school district, they have taken those same standards, and these are the standards that we're following and going by. It's just on that 100-point scale as opposed to a 4-point scale with, a specific rubric that matches it. So I would say we're all in the same mindset and goal with standards-based, like making sure that what we are teaching and doing is standards-based, because we have end of the course exams that measure that. It's just, it looks different in different schools.
So I guess the reason I asked that question is, should it be optional for new teachers coming to the district that says, oh, I've done standards-based grading? Are we doing it different than the way they did it? That's the reason I asked the question.
So it's definitely not optional, it's just a longer period of time, it's just more intense. So they all participate in sort of a philosophy piece and then a quick application piece. It's just a lot lengthier for somebody who is new to teaching. And so what we're seeing is, we can bring everybody to that whole thing. Everybody comes in with a little bit, some of them are 20-year veterans from a district who's been standards-based, and they said, I definitely don't need the philosophy, but I need all the application piece. Or I have somebody come in that says, I'm new to this whole thing, I need both of those things. So we're going to try to be more accommodating to whatever the situation would be.
But couldn't you arrange those days so like brand new teachers are here and then everybody is required to start, one day earlier? Because I know that when I came into the district, I came from a 100-point scale. I was completely lost. Drew knows how I felt about that. And so I was, and there wasn't a whole, it took me a long time to figure it out. So I don't know if it's an opt-in or opt-out thing. I think it's just standards-based grading is standards-based grading. However, to be able to work with the teachers, work with our superintendents, work with our principals on what that looks like in our schools, I don't know that maybe you need to do it or maybe you don't. I think it's definitely.
I'm probably not explaining myself. They do
Okay.
all come for 2 days together. And that is over half of a day's worth of material. And then they do go back to the building level and work with the building principals no matter what. But we have 2 additional days that we're only new to teaching. And so some of those aspects of that day, they said that we would have liked to have spent more time on or come in for different parts of. We're just trying to be, like I said, we're trying to be more accommodating to different needs, but I don't disagree with you. Everybody needs that, absolutely, and to know our philosophy and our why and then how we do it. But I think that breakdown in that time just kind of depends on the individual, and we can do different breakout sessions depending on their needs.
And I think it's important that throughout the year, they're also getting check-ins and training. And I'm not sure to the extent of what that's occurring now, but it sounds like you're realizing we need to do more of that because a new teacher, a teacher coming on a 100-point scale, they're not going to get it in a 30-minute session or an hour session. And so that's just from being in both sides, like making sure that checks and balances are there and they're getting the check-ins, someone's checking their grade book, making sure they understand it, whether that's a principal in the middle of one of their, evaluations, like, hey, I checked this out, talk to me about how you're grading. That's just the perspective from outside.
Yeah, so this year we had our Valley Learning Pathway that was standards-based, and everybody who is new to district is in that pathway. So that would give them 3 days of professional development with it, as well as the gradebook audits that the building principals are doing. New to teaching, we did focus more on classroom management that we will then shift a little bit more with standards-based next year. But anybody new to district did have all of their district PD centered around standards-based this year.
Go for it.
Just quickly, one other thought that just kind of came to me. It feels like to me that the biggest difficulty for most folks is the scoring piece of it. Is it possible to be able to do, for the most part, standard-based grading? Because every district is trying to reach a standard, right? Regardless of how they score it, right? Is it possible for us to do a 100-point scoring system and still be doing the standards, still trying to reach, still trying to do some of the things like, repeating tests or redoing stuff? What would be the pushback, I guess, of scoring the way a lot of the universities do, for the most part, and going back to the percentage versus the GPA? Because I'm assuming kids have to look at their GPA to figure out where they're at, rather than a percentage, like A, B, C, D, F, like the old school. So what would be the pushback of scoring with a 100-point scale, but still doing the metrics as far as the standards, still trying to reach certain things the way that we're doing it now?
Well, I taught in a school district that tried to run parallel systems, and I can tell you it failed miserably. But I'll give you some reasons why. One of the reasons why is, and I'm trying to organize how many. One would be from the teacher perspective. When you look at your grades as a class and you've got kids with all different percentages in all these different areas, you've got to take in homework versus a quiz versus a test, which is how our 100-point scale works. You don't really have a clear picture of how close they are to meeting anything. It's
As a whole, the whole class, or each individual?
So we love standards-based grading on the teacher side of things because it helps you drive instruction. So when I look at a single standard that any of your students are working on right now, and I see individual student scores for that, that's going to tell me, what are some things that I want to try to do as a teacher because my group as a whole is not getting it. I can see that. When you go to a 100-point scale, it's not clear like that. I don't know a better way. The grade, it's harder for a teacher to utilize that grading. So that would be one concern that I would have with a 100-point scale. The other issue that I have with a 100-point scale is it's not a very good measure of what a student has learned. It's a measure of some compliance behaviors, but it's not a very good score of what they actually learned. Has your student actually learned, or did they turn in and complete a lot of things? And so some people's answer is, we just need to really heavily weigh the tests. So tests are 80% of their scores now. So then the end all be all of learning is this single test score, which again, I guess it would be based on your philosophy and what you believe. But for my intention is for students to learn as they go and when they're ready. There's very few pieces of our content areas that don't spiral a lot. And so I will tell you, whether I taught math or I taught science or I taught English, I would have students that would be months that I would be working on a similar concept with them while still working on the things that we're working on class, and then they would eventually get it, which is great because then it made everything else make sense. It just, you throw in a whole bunch of points in there, it clouds the system. I don't really know another way for it. The best thing that I could do to probably relate to you all would be my performance evaluation, or if you've ever been evaluated at work. Very rarely are you rated on a 100-point scale. How you're doing in your job is usually, here's the target, did you meet it? How far away from the target are you? What are some things you need to do to get closer to the target? You give me a 79, I don't know what I need to do. I don't know exactly what that means.
You need to do more tasks and earn more points so that you could get a B- instead of a C+.
It does.
Bring in some extra Kleenex for the teacher.
That's a joke, but that happens to this day to my friends' kids, that they get extra points for everything then. And it becomes a point game. So, those would be my concerns with doing it. There may be other concerns that other principals have. They're welcome to chime in as well. But there was kind of a joke in one of the research papers we read that in 100 years of grading, we do a better job of grading our meat than we do our students' work. Because when you get a grade on a piece of meat or a cattle, it's much more descriptive and you really know what you're getting than you do when you're given a percentage of a grade. So, you know, we've been talking about it a little bit, but I mean, I'm happy to have anybody else chime in as well.
So I'm not necessarily advocating for either way. I'm trying to understand why the university, why the college level is still focusing on the 100-point scale versus standards-based grading. Does anybody know that answer?
I think I do think colleges tend to be even slower than K-12 schools in making changes. I will say that is kind of a general statement, but I don't feel like I'm an expert that could speak to all colleges. But I do think they are slower to make change. I mean, we're slow to make changes, but I think they're even slower to make changes.
I do have one comment, and this is a hand grenade. I'm going to throw it out there and then walk away. Right. You open the door by talking about curriculum a little bit. I remain very frustrated by the method in which we're teaching at the elementary level. And I feel like it's very linear. And the kids that get it have to wait for everybody to get it. It's not this three-dimensional approach where we're meeting every kid where they're at and really challenging them. So I don't know if it's a conversation you and I have and then we bring it back to the board for a broader conversation about that issue, or how to address that. But I feel like I've brought it up a few times and I'm still not quite satisfied with the progress there. So would you recommend that I give you a call, we take it offline, and then bring it back at another board meeting?
Well, actually, since you brought it up, I did have that thought, it left me, but there's just in the conversation with the high school level and talking about, some students get it here, some students get it here. How are we making sure that everyone that understands it earlier than someone else is still getting all that they possibly can out of the class?
Well, I think it's a tall order that's going to take more time. I'll give you a few examples here. So with elementary, for example, we started working that week in May in curriculum camp on reading. We're still not quite done with that curriculum. We started this semester in bringing in science and social studies. We're just partway through that. So to me, we need to first equip our teachers with a solid curriculum, like here's your course, here's your resources, here's all the things, right? Let them get familiar with that, teach that, make the adjustments that we need, and then once you have all those things provided for you, when you have 6 or plus preps a day, now when I need to be able to challenge the student or fill a gap with this student, and we do, I will readily admit this, we do tend to fill gaps before we extend, but we all, as an admin team, and I'm sure teaching staff, talk about all the time, trying to push kids too. We spend an inordinate amount of time on our bottom 15% that really need gaps filled because we've got to get good readers, right, for them to be successful the rest of their life. But that doesn't discount the other students in that higher tier that need pushed. But, my defense for our teachers would be we haven't provided them enough materials so that when you're frantically trying to prep day over day with 6 different areas and you get moved different grade levels, different years, and there's not those things there for you, that is a lot of work. And a lot of time and a lot of prep. And so what the best gift that I feel like we can give them is a really good curriculum. So then we can start providing some resources for them. Here's some extensions that you can do in this unit. Here's some extensions you can do in this unit, which is what I got to do as a teacher when I taught the same grade level, the same content area as a middle school teacher for multiple years. Then I would have all those amazing resources and those ways and those strategies to really challenge students. So I very much want that for our students, and I think that'll push our MAP scores as well. It's nothing I feel like we can do overnight. I think it's just time. I've subtly put the word patience in here, and I'm an impatient person. It's one of my worst qualities, if you want to know. But there's just no way to rush this and do it well. And so that's pretty much the best answer I have for that, although I also see the need and I want to do that. I just think we have to get some of these other basic things in place first in order to then say, this is what it looks like to stretch, this is what it looks like to fill gaps.
And stretching and filling in the gaps, that'll be baked into the structure, whereas right now it really, I don't want to oversimplify it, but it's really on the teacher to figure it out.
Correct.
And so institutionally, there's more that we see that we can do behind the scenes to help set them up to do that.
Absolutely.
And so I don't need an answer right now, but I think I would feel more comfortable if I knew what that timeline looked like. I think we can say that we need more time. I'm willing to agree to that, but I need to see like, how much time until we get to where we're trying to get to.
One of the things I was thinking of listening to the board's questions and comments and reactions tonight is, since the curriculum is the foundation for all these other things, clearly, then as we bring curriculum forward, we might take that opportunity to kind of illustrate for the board what the teachers are going to do with it next. So give you, orient you like we would a set of teachers. This is the tool we're going to give you. This is how you can use it. But to a timeline, for us to say that within another 2.5 years, we want all of the curriculum, this next round of curriculum finished, of course, because then we start revising it again. But what we can also do is we can be more specific about timelines for what pieces are going to be done sooner rather than later, and report back with the board. What's the timeline for all those complementary pieces that are built into that as well? So you guys ask really important questions, and I want to make sure that our answers come to life soon as we move forward. So it isn't just you asked the question, we gave the answer, and that's the end of the conversation. I think these are more about this whole thing is a process, and I think it's really evident to me that it's really important that the board is actively engaged in every step of the process along the way. So this is, I think one of the things that was a little bit misleading this year was, although although this whole journey was very much a part of our annual priorities, the priority language itself was around a curriculum audit and a timeline for curriculum development. And that is something that we've obviously done, but it really, from a board's perspective, doesn't begin to touch the surface of the questions and the curiosities that you have about how we do the work that we do. So I think one of the things we need to make sure we're really clear on framing next year's priorities, and Dr. Allen kind of led with this, is that the grading, the grading and the feedback really needs to be fundamental, baked into the priority language itself, so that when we're reporting back to the board on a regular basis, you're seeing progress on things that are more related with the types of questions you're asking tonight. And I think next year is the year for that. And in the meantime, I think we can talk about it behind the scenes, but I think there's some things that we can do to continue to orient the board throughout the spring and into the summer to show you some of the things that we told you tonight. And take the time. I'm glad we've taken this time tonight to do this piece, but I think we need to take more time to really break down and go on some of these individual journeys of some of these things that we've talked about, really illustrate them for you tonight. And if we need to have other folks come in and help illustrate, whether it's principals or teachers, we'll do whatever it takes to help kind of make sure the board is actually on this journey along with us.
All right. Any other questions for now? Thank you. All right. The next item on the agenda is going to be the minutes from the February 11th, 2025 District Finance Committee.
Yes, this is one of the board's community engagement committees, and their primary role this last time was to review the draft February budget amendment that is coming up in new business for you. So they got to put eyes on it and ask questions, and they will meet again on April 1st.
All right. Any questions on the minutes? All right. I'll take us to unfinished business. The 2025-2026 school district calendar. Dr. Welly alluded to that earlier. I would look for a motion to approve the 2025-2026 school district calendar as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All right, Dr. Welly, you want to?
Yeah, two quick changes since the last time you saw this at your February workshop. We've added the designation of President's Day, which is February 16th, as a possible snow makeup day. We did that this year, and we just thought, well, instead of having multiple amendments to next year's calendar, let's just do that one. And then we also today did a recalculation. So down in the red numbers, we have 6 AMI days and 7 snow makeup days built into this calendar. So those are the 2 changes since the February workshop.
I do have a quick question, I'm sorry. Last week in July, the new teacher orientation and the new district teacher orientation, are our teachers compensated for that additional week of work?
It's not a lot, but yes. I mean, it's not their daily rate of pay, but they're given a small stipend for coming each day, yes.
That one's next.
All right. Any questions? No? Okay. All in favor of approving the calendar as presented, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. That'll take us to new business, the budget amendment for 2024-2025. I'd look for a motion to approve the amendment to the 2024-2025 budget as presented.
So move.
Second.
And Dr. Welly, you want to go over that?
Yeah, I'll serve it up a little bit, and then we also have Mr. Aaron Hooper with us, our Director of Finance, who prepared the document for us, and he can help answer any questions. What you have at the top of page 1 are changes in the revenue side of our budget, followed by down below the changes in expenditures, and our current operating excess is $163 $100,000, which I wouldn't get too excited about the fact that it looks like we're sitting on $163,000 because things can change, but it is encouraging to know that at this point in the school year, we are tracking accordingly. So you'll see some grants that are listed as both revenue and expenditure because that's how they're budgeted. You bring the money in and you put the money out. So those were three things that were not listed on the original budget. But there's some other adjustments to revenues and expenditures, and we'd be happy we can go down the list, or if you have specific things you're curious about, we can speak to those as well.
Any comments or questions on the budget amendment? All right. All in favor of approving the amendment as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next item would be to add one special education FTE for the 2025-2026 school year. I would look for a motion to add that FTE.
Second.
So we would like to, the reason we're bringing this to you now at this early stage is because these are highly competitive positions and we want to get it posted right away. We know we need to do this. In fact, by spring, we could determine that we need a second special education teacher addition, but this at least gets the job posted. And who knows, maybe in the process of filling this one position, we see another positive candidate that by the time we're ready to maybe post another job or fill another opening, then we've got a list of great candidates. We will also post, along with this, 2 other priority positions. One, we want to add a high school English language arts teacher. That position, though, is we're going to reassign an FTE that was formerly middle school theater. So instead of having 2 middle school theater teachers, we're going to go down to 1 next year, just based on how we've been trending with demand for that. And we would certainly welcome the opportunity in the future with increased demand. We'd like to bring back that other theater position, but it pays off this time. And we also want to post an elementary 4th grade teaching position, but we are going to go down, at this point we're projecting we're going to go down 1 kindergarten teaching position, and so that FTE will be transferred into 4th grade. So we're getting 3 new positions for the price of 1 with the approval of this motion tonight.
All right, thank you. Any questions, comments? No? All in favor of approving the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Next item will be to amend the 2024-2025 school district calendar. I would look for a motion to amend the calendar as presented.
So moved.
You want to fill us in on what we're changing?
Yes, we will, we're asking you to designate April 8th, which is a full day in-service day, so no school for students. That's also election day, second Tuesday in April. We would ask that be designated as a snow makeup day, and we would have the full intention of using that as one of our snow makeup days. So given the 11 days we've missed so far, that means we would come back after Memorial Day for 1 day, for the Tuesday after Memorial Day.
Any discussion on this item?
I know, especially like public feedback, everybody didn't want to come back after Memorial Day, and we would love to avoid it. Unfortunately, we're not in that position. So with having 1 day after Memorial Day, like at what point, like if our attendance is really low, like how do we, because my question then, and this is not going to be popular, however, I wonder if people see it more substantial, if you have 2 days after versus not doing the PD day or any of those combinations, I think you have a higher possibility of people attending. I don't know, it's all conjecture.
No, I agree with you, and I also agree that I think a lot of people would disagree with us.
Okay.
And
that,
because it would be unpopular.
Right.
However, there's another hidden layer to this, and that is that week of Memorial Day that is supposed to fall between the regular school year and summer school is the #1 week of the year for us to develop curriculum. and we have such an ambitious schedule for curriculum development. We want every single day that we can that week for curriculum development.
Gotcha.
So that's the,
Fair. No, that helps.
just so you know,
Yeah.
other provision.
What about spring break?
Spring break, we did not put on the chopping block. I think that it would also have very poor attendance, and I think our added challenge would be is staffing, staffing our classrooms on spring break.
Just throwing it out there.
No, you're right, and if this winter went even further down the drain, like those are days. Those are days to designate. But at least the week after Memorial Day, we gave everybody a full year's notice that those were snow days, whereas they probably made plans for their spring break because we had not designated those as snow makeup days.
Would attendance after the Memorial Day, that option, if it was really low, would that affect any of the funding?
It will impact, but it would be minuscule. Like it's the holistically the calculation on ADA, but with the calculation and the incentive for improved teacher pay for the $200,000+ to improve teacher pay for the following budget year would outweigh, it would offset.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, all in favor of approving the calendar, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. And that takes us to board scholarships.
We do not have scholarship applications yet, but we thought we would see if we could get 2 to 3 board member volunteers to serve on a committee to review those applications when they become available. Over the last couple of years, you have issued $1,000 scholarships to 16 students. You could do that again this year. You have a balance of $16,100. This is scoreboard revenue off the stadium scoreboard. You've been generating an average of $10,500 a year for the last 5 years off of the revenue. So a couple of years ago, prior to 2 years ago, our balance was growing, and the board wanted to be as generous as possible, which is great. And we said at that time that at some point we're going to have to do something different. So I don't have a suggestion for you. I think one of the things we've noticed is the last couple of years there were so many applications and there were so many high-quality applications that neither one of those years was the year to say, no, we're going to cut this back, or we're only going to give 12, or we're only going to give 10. So I would say expect to give $10,000 to $16,000 scholarships, perhaps, including you will also review the Belcher applicant that you granted in November or December for consideration. Sometimes you've gone back and given a $1,000 scholarship. But for tonight, we just would take some volunteers, and we have one here.
I'd volunteer.
Okay.
How
That
many
makes 3.
volunteers? Yeah. Can't have 4 though, right?
No, I think 3 is the max.
That sounds good.
Okay.
All right, thank you for the volunteering. So if we go 16, that sounds like that's the max we can give if they're at $1,000. And I'm sure we'll have conversations as a board moving forward as to what we want to do. All right, the next item will be the board policies, and this is for policy IGBH, Programs for English Learners. I would look for a motion to approve the policy IGBH as presented.
Second.
Dr. Welly, you wanna go over that one?
Yes, this is initiated locally, but it is to align our policy language with state guidance. So we just wanted, this was our 3-year, right? This was our 3-year tiered monitoring for the program. And so since we were putting eyes on everything we were doing for English language learners, we realized that the language of this policy needed to be updated. So we even gave MSBA the opportunity to give us updated revised language, and they said, we haven't touched it yet. And we said, well, we're gonna move ahead, and they're fine. So ours, who knows, ours may serve as the model for the next revision packet that comes out. This is the second read. So we would, if you choose to approve it tonight in open, like you have with your motion, that would be great. Otherwise, we would move it to consent agenda next time.
Any questions on it?
So are we approving it or putting it in?
If nobody has any questions or comments on it, we will approve it. All right. All in favor of approving policy IGBH as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. I would now look for a motion to adjourn. And there's lots of treats, so don't leave without getting treat snacks.
So
Snacks on the
moved.
table.
Sarah? Yes. Aaron? Jared?
Yes.
Julie? Jason? Lance?
Yes.
I'm yes. Thank you all. Thanks for coming.